Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 23rd of October of 2025. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Kherson direction, where the Russians managed to cross the river of Dnipro and to capture some territories on the Ukrainian side of the river. So I would like to remind you that during the previous days and since during this October we got lots of interesting updates about the situation in this area. Several days ago, some sources reported that the Russians crossed the river of Dnipro around the settlement of Pokrovsk and the settlement of Sadova, but this information yet hasn't been confirmed by any source. And today we got report that the Russians launched offensive operation to the south of the city of Kherson in the area of the Ostrov microdistrict and the Karabil microdistrict. So let's take a look at the video. This video was published by Russian resources, and here we can see how Russian commanders were planning the plan, how exactly they're planning to, we're going to cross the river of Dnipro, how the Russians were planning to land infantry, and right after this we can see several episodes how Russians were attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the island to the south of the city of Kherson. So as you can see, there was very close combat. Here we can see how Russians were crossing some different positions, some different lakes or something like this, and in the final part of the video we can see several episodes how Russians were filming and how Russians were showing us another part of the city of Kherson. And as for this part of the video, it's very difficult to say what exactly the Russians were trying to tell us by this video, but it seems that this microdistrict, or at least this part of the microdistrict, was also captured by Russia. We haven't adjusted this part of the city of Kherson, but we believe that something important is happening here right now, because this is the moment. So for example, here we can see, obviously we can see that probably some building was destroyed, and here we can see how a Russian soldier raised the flag of the unit that was responsible for this operation on the ruins, above the ruins of some building. Obviously this territory we are not able to, let's say, geolocate this construction, but it happened exactly already in the city limits of Kherson. So now let's return back to map and let's discuss the changes on the ground. First of all, let's take a look at the map at the end of the 22nd of October. So this is exactly what we could see yesterday. During the previous days, if you remember, we got reports that the Russians improved their positions in this region. And now, according to information we have, according to the official statement of the unit who is responsible for this offensive operation, the Russians captured this island. But as you can see, and when talking about this island, we don't have constructions. We have one construction here, but it seems that this is not something that was captured by Russia. Anyway, we have adjusted the map. Furthermore, in the final part, in the final episode of this video, this one, we can see that the Russians for some reason are trying to show us another part of microdistrict of the city of Kherson, this one, and this is exactly what the Russians were filming and were showing us with FPV drone. So it seems that they're trying to tell us that maybe this part was also captured by the armored forces of the Russian Federation. As of now, we don't have enough of proofs to make changes on the ground and so on, so let's keep an eye on this situation, because it seems that the Kherson direction is going to be very active in 2026, and currently what we can see is Russia's attempts to improve their positions along islands along the river of Dnipro, and it seems that the battle for Kherson already awaits us. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions in the Gulyai-Polye direction. The Russians continue bombing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the fields. The Russians captured several days ago the Poltavka fortified area, and now the Russians are trying to prepare themselves before moving further in the western direction. The next target for the armored forces of the Russian Federation is the settlement of Novopavlivka, is the settlement of Nova. The Russians are bombing this territory. There are still very heavy clashes for the settlement of Uspenovka. The Russians made several attempts to cross the river of Yanchul, but those attacks were repelled by the Ukrainians. Now the Russians are focused on taking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the Russian side of the river of Yanchul. We are talking about the settlements of Krasnogorsk and Privilya. Currently there are very heavy clashes for this territory. Furthermore, the Western and pro-Ukraine resources confirmed that the Russians are moving exactly exactly in this direction. So in coming days, most likely this part of the river of Yanchul would be colored in Russian favor. Furthermore, the Ukrainians are trying to counterattack Russians with the purpose to slow them down in the area of Yegorovka, Tsegelne, and Vishnyovo. The Russians attack positions of the armed forces of Ukraine with FAPs, with aviation and artillery. So, for example, today was published very interesting video, this one, and here we can see how Russians discovered positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, and then Russians attacked this territory with Tornado S multiple launch rocket system. According to pro-Russian source, this temporary deployment point was destroyed. So we see that the Ukrainians are trying to bring additional reinforcements and reserves from the south, not from the north. Ukrainians currently can't bring anything from the north because the bridges in this area were destroyed by Russian fire. So the only way to support Ukrainian contingent in the area of Yegorovka and Tsegelne is to send units from the Gulay-Polyev direction, but it is going to be a very difficult task because there are huge distances and Ukrainians have to move always under the open space. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Novopavlivka direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. It seems that Russians launched their major offensive operation with the purpose to cut the Novopavlivka pocket. The Russians are tasked to maintain the line in this area. The Russians in coming days most likely will intensify their offensive operation, and at the end of this Novopavlivka offensive operation, the Russians will try to establish complete control over the territories along this red line. As of now, the Russians are just getting closer and closer, but they are still too far to the city limits of Novopavlivka. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk Mirnograd agglomeration. The situation here, it's not just a critical situation, it is already a complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of icons, lots of videos, lots of geolocations that confirm just one thing, that the Russians are attacking the Pokrovsk agglomeration from every single direction, from the southwest, from the south, from the southeast, from the east, from the northeast, and from the north. The Russians are tightening the news around Ukraine positions, and today, according to information we have, the Ukrainians began retreating and began withdrawal their positions in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Grishna. So we have changes, as you can see, so let's discuss them in details. First, let's talk about the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous 24 hours, this video was published, and here we can see how Ukrainians attacked a building in the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk. But when talking about this video, we don't know for sure who exactly attacked this building, who exactly was inside of this building. The Ukrainians are saying that Russian soldiers were there, and that is why they attacked this territory. But as of now, we haven't adjusted anything based on this video. We're waiting for additional proofs or additional clarification. But once again, it's very important to keep this information in our minds, that we start receiving some updates from, let's say, already eastern part of the city of Pokrovsk. Of course, if this is exactly what we just discussed, that Ukrainians attacked Russian forces there, then this is already a complete collapse of Ukrainian positions in the southern part of the city. During the day, some pro-Russian resources reported that Russians managed to answer the settlement of Rih, and that the Russians answered the settlement of Gnatovka. So we are waiting just for additional geolocations and clarifications, and of course we will adjust the map. In the southeastern part of the city of Mirnograd, as it was stated by several resources, the Ukrainians are not showing Russians resistance with the purpose to not allow them to answer the city of Mirnograd. Now the Ukrainians are fighting just with one purpose, to allow units in the northern part and in the city of Pokrovsk to regroup themselves and to evacuate. So this is just, it's not like a defense operation. It's already an operation with the purpose to win some time, to win a day, to win 2 days, to win another week. As for the northern part of the settlement of Mirnograd, this video was published today by pro-Ukraine resources, by pro-Ukraine sources, and here we can see how a Ukrainian drone was flying above the northern part of Mirnograd, trying to discover Russian soldiers. So during this video, we will not be able to see Russian soldiers, units, tanks, vehicles, nothing of this, but we see that Ukrainians are flying above this area because it seems that they know for sure that there are Russians there, and they're trying to find them with the purpose purpose than to attack them with drones or with artillery. So we expect that in coming days, maybe even hours, somebody will publish a video where we would see Russian positions in the northern part of the city of Mirnograd, and if it happens, we can say that there are no more chances for Ukrainians to hold their positions in the city of Mirnograd and the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, because it would be impossible for Ukrainians to carry out proper logistic. It's going to be just an let's say agony of the Ukrainian forces. And probably the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Rodinske. This is a key settlement in this direction, and it seems that the city of Rodinske is about to be captured by Russia. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we got lots of updates. But before we start, first let's take a look at how the map was changing. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 22nd of October of 2025, and as you can see, the Ukrainians were controlling up to 60% of Rodinske. And from this perspective, of course, Ukrainians had the chances probably to, let's say, to stay and to hold their positions for another week or two. But this morning, we got reports that the Russians managed to improve their positions. Let's discuss these reports in details. The first one was published about the situation in the northern part of the settlement of Rodinske. The Russians managed to improve their positions in the northern part, and they managed to get as close as possible to the western part of the settlement, where the main Ukrainian positions are located. The Ukrainians are trying to hold these positions because everything depends on this, and most important, the possibilities and capabilities of Ukrainians to retreat if everything goes completely wrong, so they can retreat in the northwestern direction, and that's it. So that is why this is the only thing that is under Ukraine control. But when talking about this bridgehead doesn't mean anything, let's say, for the Pokrovsk agglomeration, because this bridgehead doesn't mean that Ukrainians control logistics. Another important video was published from the southwestern part of the city of Rodinske. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones. So the most important episode is this one. Here we can see how Ukrainians with FPV drones attacked a building. Then we can see a very heavy explosion. This building was geolocated, and this is exactly the building that was attacked by Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians reported that they were attacking positions of the armed force of the Russian Federation. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians managed to cut the city of Rodinske at least in two pieces, and the Russians control the road between these two pieces, between the northern and the southern one. Also, later during the day, we got another video published once again by pro-Russian sources. Here we can see how Russian soldiers were running from the southern direction in the northern direction towards the city of Rodinske. Here we can see just two Russian soldiers. First they cross some fields, then they enter the city limits, and then they will continue moving further in the northwestern direction. And during the next seconds, we can see how Russian soldiers answered the high-rise building area of the city of Rodinske. We see that the Russians seems to be they're not afraid of anything. They don't see and they don't feel any risk from the Ukrainian side. Telling the truth, they feel free themselves in this area, which means that Russians control this territory and they have a strong control over the territory. So all these episodes took place exactly in this area. According to the video that we've just seen, the Russians were moving from the north-southern direction in the northern direction. Here, this is exactly the point that when Russians entered the city limits, and this is the building that Russians entered inside. So this is the road of the movement of the progress on the ground of the Russian units, and based on this video we have adjusted the map. So now we believe that the entire settlement of Siversk and Lyman was captured by Russians, and Russians entered the city of Rodinske from the southeast, and today several pro-Russian resources reported that the entire southern part of the settlement of Rodinske is already under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, which means that this is the end for the city of Mirnograd and the city of Pokrovsk. Ukrainians are losing their last roads for evacuation, and during the next days the situation will just worsen for Ukrainians, and we will witnessing this every single day, every single hour, and every single video. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation to the north of the city of Pokrovsk in the area of breakthrough. Today, pro-Ukraine resources yesterday, and the neutral mappers confirmed that indeed the Ukrainians counter-attacked in the area of Kucherov Yar, and based on these reports we adjusted the map, we added contested area. But there is one problem that I would like to point to attention. Some pro-Russian very reliable resources reported completely opposite thing about the situation. The Russians reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions towards villages of Novopavlivka, Mariivka and Petrivka. So the Russians are telling us completely different situation. We will discuss this report tomorrow during the next video, but one thing is clear, that something strange and very interesting is happening here. The Ukrainians are telling us their own story. The Russians are giving us completely different updates. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. But if you ask my opinion, as of now, this bridgehead is no longer important for Russians, because in coming days, weeks, probably before the beginning of December, the Russians will capture the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and then Russians will be able to answer the Zaporizhzhia and Donbas operational spaces, and this will allow them to advance further in the northern direction. And as you can see, there are no more big towns, and the cities would be on the Russian way. The Russians will move from one village to another, as they did in the Zaporizhzhia direction and so on, and it seems that Ukrainians will not be able to show any resistance for Russia. Furthermore, by taking under control the Pokrovsk agglomeration, the Russians will be able to get a very huge bridgehead where the Russians would be able to concentrate forces, and Ukrainians will lose these possibilities because they will be forced to be moved in the direction of these all small villages. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting videos and we adjusted the map based on them. So this is the situation by the end of the 22nd of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the end of the 23rd. So this video was published by Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Russians were attacking in the direction of the city of Siversk with motorcycles. This video was published today. Here we can see dozens of Russians on motorcycles under very heavy artillery fire or fire of FPV drones, and they were moving in the direction of dense network of the fortifications. So this episode took place here. During this video there were a few more episodes. One of them took place in the vicinity of the dam, and we believe that Russians captured these trenches. The Russians improved their positions around the dam, and we see that the Russians are moving further. It seems that the Russians are planning to shorten the distance with the city of Siversk from the east by entering this dense network of the fortifications to the east of the city of Siversk. The situation here is very complicated, and we see that Russians are trying to tighten the news around the settlement as well. Furthermore, the Russians established complete FPV drone control over the logistic between Siversk and the city of Lyman. During the previous 24 hours, lots of videos were published how Russians were attacking vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles and tanks along this road, and lots of units of the armored forces of Ukraine were destroyed. So Ukrainians have no chances to bring fresh forces either in the direction of Lyman or in the direction of Siversk from the mainland using this road, logistic road, and which means that the situation is getting very difficult. Furthermore, the city of Lyman currently is the key city, and the Ukrainians lost any possibilities to supply their contingent there. Maybe there are pontoon bridges across the river of Seversky Donetsk, but obviously all these pontoon bridges cannot probably fulfill the Ukrainians' requirements in their logistic. So what is happening? First of all, the Russians, according to several pro-Russian resources, managed to capture very big stronghold to the east of the city of Lyman. We are talking about this one. This information was reported by pro-Russian resources. The distance between this stronghold and the city of Lymansk itself is around 2 kilometers, which means that this is already nothing. Furthermore, we start receiving first videos from the outskirts of the city of Lyman. We can see how Russians were attacking vehicles and different transport of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. Lots of vehicles were ambushed, as you can see, and destroyed. Furthermore, today pro-Ukrainian resources reported that once again another sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armored forces of the Russian Federation entered the city of Lyman itself. So the situation is very difficult, and we see that the southeastern flank of the settlement collapses. Furthermore, we got report that the Russians destroyed the pontoon bridge along the Siversk and River between the city of Lyman and the city of Siversk. Here we can see exactly in the city of Lyman and the city of Slaviansk. Here we can see exactly the moment when Russians destroyed the bridge. The bridge was destroyed, but Ukrainians were trying, and they tried to repair the bridge. They brought engineering equipment in this area, but when Russians discovered this engineering equipment, the Russians destroyed it with FPV drone. So we see that Russians control the situation along the Siversk Donetsk. They know about every single pontoon bridge or every single place where Ukrainians can cross the river, and they try to destroy it as soon as they see this. Furthermore, the Russians continue offensive operation in the area of Novopavlivka and Drobyshevo. You know that this is another area where Ukrainians could get supply in the direction of Lyman, but the Russians are too close for this territory. And furthermore, if you remember, a few days ago we got report that Russians captured this small corner in the area of the Novopavlivka railway station, which means that this road for supply is no longer available for Ukrainians as well. Ukrainians are trying to bring additional forces to the line of combat contact, but it seems that nothing can get even the line of combat contact. Everything can be destroyed probably at the beginning of its road. For example, in this video we can see how Ukrainians sent another vehicle with reinforcements and reserves, but this vehicle was destroyed on the territory of the village of Yarova. As for the Kupyansk direction, the situation here is almost the same as we can see in the area of the city of Lyman. First of all, the Russians managed to encircle Ukrainians in the western part of the city. This is the situation by the end of the 22nd of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 23rd of October. The Russians, according to several very reliable pro-Russian resources, managed to capture these small, let's say, roads for evacuation that Ukrainians used to have a few days ago. We're not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, obviously, but maybe 10 or 20 or 100 soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine were caught and cordoned by Russians exactly in this sector. Furthermore, the Russians established full control over the river Voskol. Today we got a few more videos how Russians were bombing pontoon bridges that Ukrainians were trying to repair or to create with the purpose to allow Ukrainians to evacuate from one side of the river to another. But as you can see, as a result of attack, this bridge was destroyed. A bit further in the southwestern direction, we have a few more videos how Ukrainians were trying to bring forces or to bring units to the line of combat contact, but the vehicles were destroyed as well. So the situation for Ukrainians in the Kupyansk direction is very complicated, but the Russians are not in a hurry. Now the Russians are trying to finish the battle with the city of Pokrovsk, and most likely with the end of this battle we're gonna see lots of interesting changes everywhere in politics and of course along the line of combat contact and many other things. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.